It was a quiet Sunday, the kind of morning we usually spent in soft silence. The sun was spilling through half-open blinds, toys scattered across the rug like little flags from yesterday's play. I was refilling my coffee, counting the seconds out of habit, when my daughter opened her mouth. We'd been waiting for this moment, the milestone every parent imagines. Her lips formed around the sound, crisp and deliberate, but the word that came wasn't "Mama" or "Dada." It was "Evan." She said it again, clearer, with the certainty of someone repeating something she had practiced. My wife's smile appeared, bright and immediate, then flickered. She brushed it off with a laugh and said, "She must have heard it in the hallway." But she didn't look at me. She looked at the window that faced the stairwell. My name is Daniel Hale. I work as a compliance officer for a mid-sized credit union in Ohio. It's not glamorous work, but I spend my days untangling financial records, tracing transactions, and making sure money goes where it should. I've been told I'm relentless with details, that I notice what others overlook. It's a skill I've come to trust, not just in the office, but in every corner of my life. I didn't react to the word, not outwardly. I just lifted Maya into my arms and asked lightly, "Who's Evan?" My wife's laugh was too quick, too thin. "The neighbor," she said. Of course I knew who she meant. He lived across the landing, called himself a freelance designer, and had a way of being around at odd hours. He once helped me carry up groceries and made sure I remembered it. He smiled at my daughter as if she were a secret only he understood. Babies don't invent names. They repeat what they hear often enough to know it belongs. I told myself it was chance, just a sound she picked up, but the thought didn't settle. Instead, it pressed into me like a stone. In my work, I've learned not to chase shadows. You wait. You collect. You prove. That morning, I decided the same applied here. I wouldn't accuse. I would observe. Maya tapped 2 blocks together and whispered the name again, softer now, as if confiding in the air. My wife clapped her hands, turned toward the window, and said it was funny. I watched her reflection in the glass, the way her hand rose to her hair and then fell. I marked the time in my head, the way I always do when something shifts. Not anger, not panic, just procedure. The following week unfolded with the precision of a ledger that doesn't quite balance. Each entry seemed ordinary until you looked too closely. That Tuesday, I came home from the office an hour earlier than usual. Compliance training had ended ahead of schedule. The apartment was quiet except for a faint hum of music. I walked down the hall, and as I passed the window overlooking the landing, I saw him. Evan. He stood too close to my door, speaking in low tones, his shoulders angled toward the frame as if leaning into the space inside. My wife's voice floated out, light and unguarded. By the time I opened the door, he had already stepped back. He greeted me like nothing was unusual, called me man, and walked back across the landing with a slow, easy stride. Anna was in the kitchen, rearranging dishes as if they had been in the wrong place all day. She smiled, said Evan had stopped by to borrow a ladder. We don't own a ladder. At work, I deal in numbers and patterns. Human behavior is no different. When a signature repeats where it doesn't belong, I circle it. When a deposit comes in just below a reporting threshold, I mark it. The signs were there at home, too. Her phone flipped face down when I entered the room. Late night, errands, that grew more frequent. A hesitation in her tone when I asked simple questions. None of it was conclusive, but in my field, a dozen small anomalies add up to a picture you can't ignore. I tried to quiet the noise inside me. We had built 10 years together, a mortgage, a child. You don't put that on trial because of suspicions. Still, every time Maya said his name, the sound felt sharper. She said it in the morning when Anna lifted her from the crib. She said it in the evening while stacking cups on the floor. Always clear, always with the confidence of a child repeating what she had heard, over and over again. One night, after Anna fell asleep, I sat in the living room with the lamp off and her phone on the table between us. I don't search devices at work without cause, and I don't search them at home without restraint. But restraint is not the same as denial. I didn't open her messages. I didn't need to. The lock screen lit up with a notification around midnight. The preview line showed his name, nothing more, but it was enough to make the blood in my chest tighten. The next morning I asked her casually about Evan. She stirred sugar into her coffee and told me he had mentioned needing help with some freelance work, something about design software. She said it too quickly, as if the words had been waiting. I nodded, as if satisfied, but I wasn't. In audits, explanations that arrive too fast are the ones I examine longest. What struck me hardest wasn't anger but humiliation. The idea that everyone else might see what I was pretending not to. That my daughter, without knowing, was already the witness. It pressed against my ribs until breathing felt deliberate. At work, I reviewed loan applications, flagged inconsistencies, and guided junior analysts through procedures. But my focus kept slipping. Every discrepancy on paper reminded me of the one unraveling in my home. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. That's not who I am. But I began to take notes. Not on company letterhead, not in the system, but in a notebook I kept at home. Dates, times, incidents. Nothing dramatic, only what could be observed, what could be verified. I told myself it was a precaution, that clarity would either ease my mind or give me the strength to face the truth. The moment of certainty arrived on a Thursday night. I had stayed late at the office, reviewing a file flagged by regulators, but something in me refused to call it a night. I drove home earlier than Anna expected. As I stepped into the building, the stairwell light clicked on. From the second-floor landing, I heard her laughter, low and unrestrained, followed by his voice. The sound of it was not neighborly. It was intimate, practiced. My hand froze on the rail. I didn't need to see them. My body understood before my mind wanted to. I walked inside minutes later. The air smelled faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. Anna was in the kitchen, her hair loose, cheeks warm with color. She looked startled when she saw me, then overcompensated with too much cheer. I kissed my daughter goodnight, tucked her in, and sat in the living room with the television on mute. The truth didn't need to be shouted anymore. It was already written. Betrayal is not a single act. It is the sum of 100 little choices that accumulate until they cannot be disguised. And as I watched the numbers line up in my head, I realized I was living inside the very kind of case I spend my professional life exposing. Once the truth settles in, denial becomes impossible. The ledger of my life had revealed its imbalance, and the columns no longer matched. I am a man who depends on verification, not impulse. And now every part of me demanded clarity. The trail was already certain, but how it unfolded, and how I would respond, needed structure. For several days I moved through the house with the quietness of a recorder. I noticed details Anna assumed would pass without question. Her phone face down during dinner, the long pauses before she answered simple inquiries, the way she kept her schedule vague yet defended it quickly if I pressed. It was the exact same profile I had seen in clients whose financial records were under review, defensive, elusive, too practiced in their lies. At work, I studied bank accounts and spending habits for members of the credit union. A client trying to hide misuse of funds might withdraw in small, irregular amounts. Another might create a paper trail that appears legitimate until you compare it against their actual income. These habits follow predictable arcs. I began to think of my home life as another case file. If I applied the same scrutiny, the patterns would reveal themselves. But strategy is more than observation. It is also timing, positioning, and discipline. If I reacted too soon, I risked losing any chance of clarity. If I waited too long, I risked becoming complicit in my own humiliation. I decided on a plan. Gather verifiable evidence quietly, confront only when there was no room for denial, and prepare myself for the fallout. The first step was practical. I purchased a second notebook, this time with numbered pages. I recorded dates, times, and incidents with precision. Tuesday, 7:42 p.m. Anna steps into hallway, does not return for 11 minutes. Laughter audible. Wednesday, 10:15 p.m. Phone lights up on coffee table. Message preview shows Evan. Each entry was small, but together they created a timeline, a narrative that was impossible to dismiss. The second step was emotional control. At work, I am often in meetings where tensions run high. Loan officers arguing over approvals, regulators pushing for compliance adjustments. I learned long ago that the one who keeps his voice steady holds the power. At home, I applied the same principle. I smiled when necessary, asked neutral questions, and avoided giving her reason to believe I suspected. My silence was not weakness. It was positioning. The third step was preparation for confrontation. I consulted an attorney discreetly. I didn't tell him my full suspicions, only asked what documentation mattered in cases of marital infidelity. He explained that in Ohio, while adultery has little impact on division of assets, it can influence custody if the child's welfare is affected. He advised that I gather records, not speculation, phone logs, witness statements, written timelines. I thanked him and left. My plan was no longer just about emotional closure. It was about protecting my daughter. Meanwhile, I studied Evan. I observed when he came and went, what packages arrived for him, who visited his apartment. I noticed he wore a certain cologne, the same scent I sometimes caught faintly in our living room after late evenings. He presented himself as casual, easygoing, but his movements were too calculated. He reminded me of clients who spoke smoothly but avoided direct answers. Confidence masking dependency. One evening, after Anna had put Maya to bed, I suggested we take a weekend trip, just the three of us. Her hesitation was immediate, and then she recovered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe later," she said. That moment told me more than any message ever could. If she had been innocent, she would have embraced the idea. Instead, she looked cornered. The realization that my marriage had been breached was painful, but it came with a second realization. I was not powerless. My professional skills, honed over years of audits and investigations, were now the tools I needed most. I was trained not to let personal feelings cloud my judgment. I knew how to assemble proof, present it without embellishment, and ensure it stood against scrutiny. My strategy was simple: continue recording, remain outwardly calm, and prepare the confrontation for a moment when denial was impossible. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was pursuing clarity, justice, and protection for my child. Betrayal had turned my home into a case, and like every case before it, I would see it through to the end. I moved from suspicion to action. A man can live with doubt for a while, but when it becomes constant, the only cure is clarity. At work, I was trained to document, verify, and close the loop on inconsistencies. I decided to treat my own home with the same discipline. The first step was the building's cameras. Our manager Phelps kept the feeds on file because of package thefts last winter. I asked to review them, pretending I was concerned about strangers in the stairwell while my wife and daughter were alone. He didn't hesitate. We sat in his office while the grainy footage rolled forward. Tuesday night, Thursday night, Saturday afternoon. At 8:22 p.m. on Thursday, Anna opened our door in a sweatshirt and bare feet. Seconds later, Evan crossed the landing, his hand brushing her shoulder as he slipped inside. The camera saw no more than that, but it didn't need to. I asked Phelps to export the segments and sign the log. He did. I walked out with a USB drive and a receipt, the kind of small administrative detail that turns an accusation into a case. Next was the router. I had set parental controls months earlier and still knew the login. The device list showed everything that had connected recently: TV, printer, thermostat, and one entry that didn't belong. Evan iPhone, 4 connections over the last month, including one night I had recorded as a late errand. I took screenshots with embedded timestamps, printed them, and noted the router's model and firmware version. It wasn't hacking, it was my own network. Another quiet piece of truth. I wasn't only building a case against her, I was building one for myself. Courts don't just look at betrayal, they look at who provides stability. I started collecting daycare sign-in sheets with my signature, pediatric appointment reminders sent to my phone, time-stamped photos of bath time and bedtime. Each one was proof of continuity, of safety, of the life I gave our daughter. If custody ever became contested, I wanted no ambiguity. I met with my attorney again, this time with specifics. He listened, then repeated the same guidance: do not provoke, do not move out, and keep records clean. If you confront, he said, do it when denial is impossible. That way you control the ground under your feet. Who? I left his office with calm in my chest. Meanwhile, I observed Evan. He had a rhythm. Late mornings, midday coffees, odd deliveries. Twice I saw him carrying design boards, though he never mentioned work to me directly. He moved with the same casual confidence I'd seen in clients, trying to disguise dependence on someone else's money. Always relaxed, always smiling, but always hiding. The break came on a Saturday. I told Anna I'd be away for a compliance seminar. Instead, I left Maya with my sister and parked 3 blocks from our building, watching the reflection in the pharmacy's glass doors. At 2:11 p.m., Evan appeared, carrying 2 coffees and a paper bag. He glanced at the stairwell camera, adjusted his stride, then buzzed. Anna opened almost instantly, hair tied back, no makeup, the look of someone who had stopped caring about appearances because she believed no one was watching. They vanished inside. I didn't storm in. That would only create noise. Instead, I walked straight to Phelps's office and asked him to come upstairs with me. I told him there was a domestic matter, and I needed a neutral presence. He hesitated, then pocketed his keys and followed. A witness is more than protection. It's a mirror, a way to stop the story from being rewritten later. We climbed the stairs. The building smelled of dust and brewed coffee. At the top, I heard voices from behind my door. Low and easy, the kind of conversation that doesn't belong to neighbors. I texted Anna. I'm done early. Heading home. The message went out at 2:23 p.m. I waited. No reply. I knocked once, steady. She opened the door, eyes wide. Surprise, not guilt, flashed across her face, the surprise of someone whose calculations had failed. Behind her, Evan froze by the table, his posture stiff, coffees abandoned, croissant torn in half like a bad excuse. I stepped inside. My movements were calm, deliberate. I asked Anna to sit. I asked Evan to stay by the door. Phelps lingered in the hallway, visible through the frame, silent but official in his ordinariness. I placed a folder on the table. Inside were the camera clips, the router logs, the printed notes. I didn't explain them yet. I just laid them down and let their weight fill the silence. You have a choice, I said evenly. We can speak plainly now, or we can let the paperwork tell the story for us. Either way, the truth is already here. The room stilled. Outside, a car door slammed, and someone laughed in the street. Inside, there was only breath. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady, back inside my own life. Start with the name, I said softly. And in that moment, the silence bent toward the truth. The silence held like a wire stretched to its limit. Anna looked at the folder as if it were a live thing that might bite. Evan shifted, adjusting his stance near the door, but said nothing. It was Anna who broke first. She lowered herself into the chair with hands clasped tight, eyes darting between me and the papers. I don't know what you think you found, she said. Her voice thin. I opened the folder slowly, not for effect, but because I've learned that pace controls the room. I slid the first page across. A still frame from the stairwell camera, the timestamp in the corner, Anna's face in the doorway, Evan's hand brushing her shoulder. This is Tuesday, I said. I placed the second image on top. Router logs with Evan iPhone listed. The connection time 11:38 p.m. This is Wednesday. Finally, the daycare form with my signature, proof of where I was that same evening. And this is where I stood while you told me you were running errands. Her lips parted, but no words came. She glanced at Evan, and in that small movement, the balance shifted. Until then, she had been the center of my life. In that instant, she was only a defendant, hoping her co-conspirator would supply a defense. Evan finally spoke. This isn't fair, man. You can't just... I cut him off with a look I reserve for people in boardrooms who think charm will bend procedure. You are a guest in my home. You will remain silent unless I ask you something. He swallowed hard, stepped back toward the door, but stayed. Anna began to cry, soft at first, then harder, but the sound didn't move me. Tears can mean sorrow, but they can also mean strategy. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she whispered. I didn't plan. Then tell the truth plainly, I said. My tone was calm, clinical. How long has it been happening? She hesitated, then gave the number I already knew was coming. Months, not weeks. She admitted the meetings in the afternoons, the texts late at night, the way she thought she could manage two lives until they collided. Each admission landed not like a wound, but like a confirmation. Betrayal hurts less when it's no longer hidden. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I only wrote down the details in my notebook while she spoke. Date of first meeting. Frequency. Her words, not mine. Every line entered as evidence. Evan shifted again, uneasy with the quiet documentation. Look, we didn't mean to hurt anyone. We just... Stop, I said without raising my voice. Your meaning doesn't matter. Your actions are already recorded. I gathered the papers, returned them to the folder, and closed it with finality. Here's what will happen, I said. You will leave this apartment now and you will not return. If you do, the police will treat it as trespassing. Anna, tomorrow I will contact our attorney and begin separation proceedings. Custody will be requested in my favor. You can contest it if you wish, but I have enough documentation to demonstrate instability. If you choose to cooperate, we can resolve this without spectacle. If not, the system will decide. The words were not threats. They were policy. Anna sobbed harder. Evan muttered something under his breath, but he left, head down, shoulders hunched. The door shut behind him with a sound that felt like a verdict. I remained standing, folder in hand. Anna's face was pale, mascara streaked. She tried to speak again, but I held up my hand. No more now. The truth has been spoken. That is enough. I walked into Maya's room, kissed her forehead as she slept, and stayed there a long while. Her small breath was steady, untouched by the chaos that had shaken everything else. That steadiness gave me strength. The next morning, I filed the paperwork. Attorney consultation became formal representation. Custody requests were drafted. Asset divisions outlined. The documents I had collected, camera clips, router logs, written notes, all shifted from personal record to legal evidence. Integrity is strongest when it can withstand external scrutiny, and mine could. When Anna's parents called me days later, I explained the situation plainly. They were devastated, but they listened. They asked if I would forgive her. I said forgiveness was separate from trust, and trust, once broken, cannot be patched with words. By the time the first hearing came, the case was already weighted heavily in my favor. Judges do not respond to emotions. They respond to order, to proof. I had both. The betrayal that had once threatened to consume me had instead become the very path by which I secured justice. Walking out of the courthouse that afternoon, folder under my arm, I felt not triumph but equilibrium. Justice is not about winning, it is about restoring balance. And balance, at last, was mine again. In the weeks that followed, the world around me looked the same, yet it wasn't. The same streets, the same grocery aisles, the same office where I reviewed loan files and flagged irregularities, but everything had shifted in weight. Betrayal doesn't just bruise trust, it rearranges how you move through life. I carried myself differently, straighter, sharper, because I had learned that vigilance at home is no less important than vigilance at work. Anna moved into a small apartment across town. Our interactions were limited to logistics, pickups, drop-offs, medical appointments for Maya. I kept every exchange polite but firm, no anger, no softness. She tried, once, to apologize again. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said quietly in the parking lot. I nodded but said nothing. I wasn't cruel, but I wasn't available either. Some truths, once admitted, no longer require discussion. Evan disappeared from the building not long after. His door was shut for days, then movers came. I didn't ask where he went. He had been a chapter in a story already closed, and I had no interest in the sequel. Through it all, my daughter remained the constant. Maya still tapped her blocks together and laughed at cartoons, still reached for me with the same trust as before, but something about her innocence felt like a reminder carved into stone. She deserved clarity, honesty, stability, not adults fumbling with secrets and half-truths. Whenever I doubted my choices, I looked at her and remembered why I had taken every careful step. What I carried away from the ordeal wasn't bitterness. It was a renewed understanding of what integrity costs and what it protects. My profession had trained me to value evidence, restraint, and clarity. In the darkest moment of my personal life, those same tools gave me the ability to hold steady, to protect my child, and to demand truth without screaming for it. I often think about the first word Maya spoke. Not Mama, not Dada, but Evan. At the time, it felt like a knife. Now it feels like a signal flare. Children repeat what they hear most. Her word forced me to face what I might have tried to dismiss. In a way, she saved me from a longer deception, from wasting years in a life built on a lie. People sometimes underestimate the quiet ones, the professionals who take notes, who sit back in meetings, who don't need to raise their voices to be heard. They mistake calm for weakness, patience for passivity. But competence paired with integrity is stronger than noise. It waits, it builds, and when the time comes, it cannot be ignored. If there is a moral in all of this, it is simple. Respect is not optional. When it is withdrawn, when trust is treated as expendable, consequences will follow, slowly, methodically, but inevitably. And those who underestimate someone committed to truth will one day face it written down in ink, undeniable. Life with Maya is quieter now. Our home is smaller, but it is honest. Each night I tuck her into bed and listen to her steady breathing. No more hidden voices in the hallway, no more false explanations. Just the sound of a child safe in her father's care. That is victory enough.